Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Last Best Hope for Conversation, your Babylon 5 podcast. We are recording on a Saturday as a change of pace. Not that it matters to you, but we've had fun getting to see each other on a Saturday morning versus our normal Sunday recording. Joining me on this bright and shiny Saturday morning, we're pretending we're watching cartoons, is Karen.
Hello.
Lou.
Yes, and we're so happy to be together because we're soulmates.
That's right.
Yes. And I am Jesse Jackson. Yes, we are discussing season 2, episode 7, Soulmates. Visitors to the station include Londo's 3 wives and Talia's ex-husband. Delenn has a bad hair day. This episode originally came out in December 1994, so it's very appropriate. It's the Christmas episode. Though there's
Is it
nothing
the Christmas episode?
No,
Yeah.
It's not. This is one of my favorite standalone episodes, probably because it was written by Peter David, and Peter David, who is one of my favorite writers. He has a very good sense of humor, no matter if he's trying to write a serious Star Trek novel, straight science fiction, whether he's working with the Hulk or Spider-Man. And I think it really showed in this episode his sense of humor. So, Lou, quick thoughts.
I quite enjoyed it. A lot of good character interplay. We learned a couple of background items about quite a few characters. And I think is this the first episode where almost every major or regular cast member gets at least one scene or two? I think it is.
For a long time.
Yeah, I agree.
And my special little buzz was to see Carol Strucken, who was the trader on the concourse, and
right.
he's played quite a few interesting characters. If you've seen Gerald's Game, he plays the Midnight Man in that adaptation. I understand he's been in Twin Peaks and done a whole bunch of other stuff. And he's a Dutchman, and my ancestry is Dutch, so I just have a natural affinity for that guy.
And he played the butler to Majel Barrett's character on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I
don't remember what his name was. Mr. something, Mr. Mott, Mr. Anyway, that's where I've seen him the most, but he's been in a lot of stuff.
Yeah. How about you, Karen?
I liked it. The guest stars were much more low-key than the last set of guest stars, but a pretty good resume for all of them. Even Blair Volk, who played Mariel, she's been in quite a few things, and she was a pretty big model in France. But, I mean, Jane Carr, who you might know from Dear John, that's where I know her from. Lois Nettleton in The Heat of the Night, and a bunch of other things. And Keith Sarabaka, funny story, I'll just get this story out of the way. He plays Oculus in World of Warcraft.
Okay.
And it's a pretty neat storyline. He opens portals. So like he teaches mages how to open portals and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's an interesting character and funny. So he's done a million voices for things, and he was in The Dark Knight and all sorts of stuff. But if you played World of Warcraft, you might know his voice from that. But anyway, I really enjoyed this episode. I liked that the storylines were mirrors, and I also I saw the ending coming down Main Street, but I thought it was really good. I mean, Peter David is flawless, I think. So
yeah. So tell my story. I had not started watching Babylon 5 yet, but I was at a local Dallas convention. And these are back in the days when, and there still are some of these, but when it's held in a hotel and not in this massive community center, it was still a pretty intimate convention. And Peter David was there, and so was Mira Furlan. And so I was attending the Mira Furlan Q&A, even though I had never watched Babylon 5, but she talked about that they answered questions, and this was right after they had filmed Sleeping in Light, and that is the final episode of the series. and they filmed it at the end of season 4 because they weren't sure they were going to get a season 5. Then when they ended up getting season 5, they saved the episode and played it at the end of season 5. Not spoilers at all, but just in context. And she's like, well, we know how it's going to end now, but and they had got word that they were going to have another season. So she mentioned was there ever an episode you didn't like? And she said, there were a couple lines I didn't like, but I don't want to say it because the writer's here. And Peter David was smiling. Yeah. She did not like the final line of the episode.
Which,
at all.
Do you know what it is? Do you know what the final line was?
The episode about her having cramps.
Oh, right.
She thought it was juvenile.
Yeah.
She didn't care for it. Though
I get why they did it. I mean, there is a reason why they did it.
What's your theory on why they did it?
To show that she's human on the inside as well, that she has human physiology. I'm assuming that's why they did it. But there were other ways to do it. It was indelicate.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I thought it was a funny line just because of Susan's. Susan does not look like the type that has a lot of quote unquote girlfriends, right? Sitting around and so by being asked for Delenn, I think that was a really funny storyline. And yes, that's exactly what, if you read Lurker's Guide, the person writing it, and this is obviously at the time they did not know what was coming in the future. He said, this seems like a throwaway line, but it may be one of the most important lines in the episode, because in the future, does that mean she could mate with a human and then have a half Mollari, half human child? And could that be important to the series? Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was my thought. I mean, immediately, I tilted my head and I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Does that mean that a Mollari and a human typically cannot mate and have children?
Well, they might not be able to have children.
Yeah. I think they obviously have had, I don't know. They are really shaky, vague on interspecies mating. I think we'll get to it in a moment. I think G'Kar certainly has enjoyed spending time with various members of the opposite sex and other races. So I will see I think, but I don't know if you're able, they have not discussed crossbreeding. So,
I just asked because obviously with Spock, half human, half Vulcan. So I didn't know if it was possible in the B5 universe as well.
Well, we know Londo would have a hard time.
Yes.
With anyone.
Yes, because he
has a very different physiology.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to. Let's stick with the Susan and Delenn storyline. Delenn's not enjoying it. She is not learning what to do. And I think that is a wonderful scene when she walks in and they're talking about how she doesn't do water. They just do chemicals that it takes off the outer layer of the skin. It is religious. It's symbolic of renewing every day. And, and Claudia's like, no, you're just trying to get clean. So I'll start with you, Lou. This whole different storyline about teaching her how to do her hair with Susan with a hairbrush. Thoughts?
Yeah, she's literally having a bad hair day. So that was pretty funny. And it's a nice character scene between the two characters. You don't get a lot of just two female characters in a scene just talking to each other, and so I enjoyed it from that perspective. And Peter David does have a good ear for dialogue and as well, so there's nothing major in this scene, but though we are getting the implication that Delenn's transformation is more than just skin deep, so that was cool to find out as well. And I just thought that the two actors had a look like they were having a lot of fun with those scenes as well. So yeah, it's a nice little scene. It's the kind of things that you can do in a TV series that you can't do in a movie, that just make the characters a little more fleshed out. And I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Okay, so let me just say, I really loved that their storyline passes the Bechdel test.
Yes.
They don't sit around and talk about men, which is great.
I didn't want to come out and say that, but
no,
that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
I think that's I always forget what the test is called, so that's the only reason I hadn't. But yes, I thought that exact same thing.
Yep. And if you guys, if the listeners don't know what it is, I mean, you can look it up, but it's essentially that if two women have conversations that don't involve men, they pass the Bechdel test. So, I mean, that it's important to a lot of women to see that, because women have discussions every day that don't have anything to do about men. And no offense to you guys, but
hard to believe, but apparently it's true.
It is true. It is true. So this storyline was, I mean, I was endeared by this storyline, if that's how to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, because the two female characters bonded, even though one of them is not into girl friendships. That's something I can identify with my entire life. I've been interested in things that most other women aren't interested in. So I've had a lot of male friends. And when I do find a female friend that I can bond with, it's amazing. And then the hair part, which Lou, you can't identify with, right? Exactly. Lou's
rubbing his bull's
head. Rubbing his pate.
Mm-hmm.
But as I have long curly hair, you don't wash long curly hair every day because you end up stripping the hair, and it gets dry and all that. So when she said that she strips the outer layer with these chemicals, it really made me laugh, because when I was younger, nobody in my family has curly hair, so I had no idea how to take care of it. And having someone like Susan help me would have been a real joy. And I have mentioned Susan's hair many times.
You have.
In the podcast. So to have a storyline that actually relates to hair where Susan is involved was cool. And again, I'm getting into stuff that I feel, but I want you guys to know, and the listeners to know, that like there are parts of this that are mundane that I identify with, and this was one of them. But the storyline of them bonding was humorous, and I found it endearing as well. So
it was interesting that Susan didn't have her hair in her normal work braid.
Right. Yeah, she had it it was down. It was a much prettier style.
Yeah, Karen, go ahead. Keep telling. You're on a roll.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that I have a lot more, but
okay.
I enjoyed her hair was down, which is cool. But recently, like in the second season, she's been doing a bit more with her hair, whether you guys noticed or not. Mm-hmm. She's had the double ponytail, where you put it in a ponytail and then you put it in another ponytail further down.
Okay.
Again, these are weird things that I noticed, but I've done my hair like that. And it's cool for me as a female to notice things in the show that I can relate to. And again, just mundane, everyday things that make me happy. So,
yeah, I really love this, because too often, she's taken on this whole new persona and everything is perfect.
Right.
And the idea of like, no, there would be transitions, and to have that played in a very funny way, but at the same time, that makes sense. It would show this is not complex. This is complex, different. One of the stories that Peter David has shared is he wrote 2 drafts for this, and they were rejected. And they told him he was too Star Trek. And Harlan Ellison, who is a very good close friend to Peter David and to J. Michael Straczynski, said, watch The Women, which was a 1939 movie. Mm-hmm. And he realized what too Star Trek meant was, and this is a quote, at the end of the story, I had restored the status quo so that all the characters were perfectly reset in the sandbox, just like a typical Star Trek episode. But B5 was all about kicking over the sandbox. So he had lost the assignment. So Ellison, Bill Mumy, who is also Peter David's friend, they did a show together. He rewrote a script and sent it back to J. Michael Straczynski. And he liked it so much that he not only gave this one, but he gave Peter David another episode to write that we'll see later. And I think that's a great story that one thing that I love about Babylon 5 is they try not to do the reset. That like this does not end with him making up with all three of his wives and doing this. So I thought that was a really nice behind the scene feedback about what's going on.
Side note, since you mentioned the women, what a great movie, by the way. And it also passes the Bechdel test.
Okay.
So I highly recommend the 39 version, not the remake. The 39 version, it had Rosalind Russell and Joan Crawford. Anyway, very cool movie.
Good. All right. So we ended up, and by the way, next week's episode there is a scene where you will watch and just where Delenn's hair looks amazing. And think about this, that in the original release, next week's episode, A Race Through the Dark Places, was shown before Soulmates. And then they ended up, it was because of special effects, but they'd always planned for Soulmates to be first. And that's why we're watching it first, because that's the order that it is in the DVD. And it's the order that's on IMDb. It is not the order that is on HBO Max. So when you see that scene, you'll go, yep, it makes sense that Soulmates was first. Yeah. It's a small thing. Okay. All right. Londo is just thrilled. Londo is happy. He is giddy because of all this work he has done for the glorious empire. The emperor has allowed him to get a divorce. And the context of this is that it is incredibly scandalous for Centauris to get divorced, that the marrying people is all about, this is political alliances and status. And he has hated all three wives. He has called them death, famine, and pestilence, I think is the three in the past. And so he is giddy that he is going to be able to get rid of two of the three of his significant others who have done nothing but drained his bank account and made him miserable. We're going to start with you, Lou. Thoughts on the three wives, the storyline, anything you want. Take it away.
Yeah, I thought all three actors cast as the wives were really good. Though the third one, she didn't have as big a part, so she didn't really have as much impact as the other two. But I thought that the main two, Timov, Jane Carr, and Degar, Lewis Nettleton, I thought they were great sparring with each other. Like Karen mentioned off the top, I knew right off the bat which one Lando was going to choose at the end. Better the devil you know than the one that you don't. So besides that, their interplay was great. Steve First was great. And he finally, after practicing, it's a pleasure to meet you, he finally got to use it.
Yes, that was a very funny scene.
At the end of the episode.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
Is a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, so that was good. And it was also very good for Londo to just revel in his joy of this opportunity to cut down on his expenses, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
He played it quite well. And his interplay with Jakar was great too, because every time Jakar would get a headache and walk away, that was funny as well. So I quite enjoyed it. And yeah, I think beyond that, like for comedic value and that, it was really well done. And the acting across all of these scenes, I really enjoyed. It was like a light, frothy, romantic comedy thing, but going in the opposite direction. But yes, I really enjoyed it, and it doesn't have anything in it beyond this episode that I think is going to really carry forward. I don't think, unless the other two wives come back, and other ex-wives now come back in some other former manner with revenge on mind. I don't know, but yeah, this thread of the story really well done. And you're at a point now where you like these characters, and it's interesting that, and I'm just worried now that Londo is going to actually jump deeper into this whole other storyline that he's got going with the Shadow People, because he's got one of his wishes granted that he wouldn't have been able to have done before if he hadn't agreed to work with either their parties that are doing all these things behind the scenes. So he's being tempted by, or he's no longer being tempted. I think he's really starting to fall into the pit of potential problems for himself going down the road. So it'll be interesting to see how this treat will affect him going further.
Treat.
Good.
I love that.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
Karen?
I love that he's reaping the benefits from this whole getting in good with the upper echelon. And we've talked about this before, that he has a lot of aspirations to climb the ladder, and seeing him actually get something from that, it was really good, especially like, what is this, the 7th episode of the season, not that far in. We're actually seeing some forward motion on that. Also, I would say, Lou, that there actually are parts of the storyline that I can foresee coming back, and it doesn't have a lot to do with his wives. G'Kar, first of all, Peter David is brilliant in that he drops things into a storyline that you might not really like notice, or on one viewing you're not going to notice anything, but almost subliminally. We have Mariel interacting with G'Kar throughout the episode, which to me implies that they were in on the attempt on Londo's life together. And that might have repercussions down the road, that G'Kar is actively trying to harm Londo. And again, that it's just implied that there's no, he throws her something at a party. We notice that they're familiar with each other. And I also thought it was funny that he kept having headaches, and then Londo gets hit in the head with, so they have this common thing together. I think that has a deeper purpose, that perhaps we're setting up something with G'Kar. Again, I don't know, because we haven't watched it, but, and then I was just scanning. I don't actually like in-depth read the Lurker's Guide anymore, because it does give away some stuff. But
I can see that.
But I do scan it, and I love that this was originally titled Pestilence, Famine, and Death as the names of his wives, the nicknames of his wives. But it also means that, and it says this on the Lurker's Guide, that Londo would be war. He would be the 5th horseman, or the 4th horseman, sorry.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's one of those details that, like, behind the scenes, we don't notice, but it has a meaning. I really appreciated that he goes for Timov as his wife. And I mean, as Lou said, we could see this. It was telegraphed rather easily to those of us who know how to watch TV, which is probably everyone listening as well. But I also appreciated that they subverted that. He didn't learn about the blood transfusion. He just picked her on his own. And I think he picked her because what? Because she was herself? Because she told the truth all the time? Yeah,
he says, I always know where I stand with you. And there is that great line where she says, the key to our successful marriage is our lack of communication. Why are you breaking this up? Which is a great line, because, and I don't mean this as a cliche, but the reality is, when someone says, what's the key to your marriage, right? Well, we communicate. We have a good friendship first, or we communicate. And the idea that the whole reason we're successful, by the way, I did not know this, and I don't know who came up with this, but once again, it's on the internet, so it can't be wrong. That in IMDb, it says that when G'Kar throws Mariel a grape, it is a clever insult. According to someone, tossing a fruit to a loved one is a sign of love or infatuation in Narn society. So by doing so, G'Kar and Mariel were pointedly saying that he was sleeping with Londo's wife to the entire room. Now, that's a subtle thing. And the implication is the end, when they're alone and he's in his robe, which I can only imagine that the actor, is like, oh, really? I have to do this? But I mean, he looks great seeing all that. Yeah, that they had been intimate. It appears very much to me, the implication is that and then she has that great line, if you were married to Londo, we'd all be in a right. So yeah, Andreas is just wonderful.
He's great.
And
that was one thing that crossed my mind as well. We think about, I guess we think about sex in this show a lot. At least we talk about it. But how were they intimate? I mean, if he's compatible with humans, and how is he compatible? I mean, you don't have to do everything to have sex, but yeah, I thought that was interesting. And of course, you know, my mind detours into this, like, I gotta pause it to think about, okay, wait a minute. And it's so dumb,
like,
but
we've established, right, that there's 6 slots and 6 tabs that go. So how did he work this out?
But again, I mean, you don't have to have slots and tabs to have sex. So
exactly. I also thought Muriel looked a little bit like the dancer that he was involved, that he was infatuated with.
There's definitely types.
I thought it was a really nice touch that Jakar poured them those little drinks after. I guess that's their equivalent of having a cigarette afterwards, but I like that. I thought that was a nice touch. I like those glasses. They were cool too.
Agreed. He is the cool cat. Yeah. Like he is.
He was Hugh Hefner in that scene.
Right.
he's the Continental.
The Continental, right.
You know, the old
Saturday,
robe on.
the Saturday Night Live. Yeah, exactly.
The Continental. Oh my God. Those sketches were so great with Peter Walken.
Yeah.
Christopher Walken. Sorry.
Yeah, and you're right. Muriel did not get as much screen time, but Dagar and Tima, which, by the way, vomit. Timov, you spell it backwards. He actually was going to. He was going to have them all because of that
pestilence
being 3 horsemen, but that one stuck. You're right. Lois Nettleton and Jane Carr were amazing, and it does say in behind the scenes that Peter Jurassic was enjoying the hell out of himself, you know, interacting with these, because they are such interesting characters. And such the give and take, and their scenes between each other, even though it doesn't pass the Bechdel test, were great about the one-upness and the smiling to each other while insulting each other was really cool.
And Karen can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I actually think those scenes pass the Bechdel test because they're not talking about the relationship with Londo. They're talking about a business arrangement more than a man arrangement. So the marriage is like a contract for money, and that's what they're talking about. They're trying to figure out how they can keep from losing that. Now, maybe
I would say not strictly,
but
because they are indirectly right.
It's not focused on their feelings for him. It's focused on their business relationship with him. And that could have been a woman for that matter, or a female character, and that would have been the same conversations, right? So.
Right. I would say, since it discusses marriage, and especially that scene where like he wants to have a threesome with them,
that's different.
Right. Right.
But their conversations about the money, I thought.
Right. Their conversations, I would say, somewhat past the Bechdel test because it is related. But and that's cool. I mean, I like how Timov and Daguerre, how they spar with each other. That's also very cool.
Yeah, I just think it was really interesting to see. And all 3 actresses really knocked it out of the park. Just the right amount of sneering and the happy face, but at the same time being cutthroat to each other. It was very, very fun to watch. Anything else about Londo's 3 Wives? We get he's in med lab. His first wife does give him a blood transfusion. And I do not, because she is a kind person, and I think I'm a romantic as I live in a diet of Hallmark Christmas movies during this time of year, that I think she in some way has affection for him. Certainly would not, it not only a sense of duty, but I could picture being them young, and when this arranged marriage, having this go back to The Crown, right? Originally, Charles and Diana, while he was in love with someone else, there was that early expectation where we can make this happen. So I think that was a nice scene of her saving his life and making sure do not know. I wonder if someone told him that, and that could be part of the reason he chose her too. I mean, that you could build that underneath. the story. But I think that was a really sweet, and Londo ends up being a softie and giving the other two
an allowance,
a settlement, an allowance. Yeah. So they're not, alone. Any other thoughts on this storyline?
I was curious about Franklin's last statement to Londo and that told him to stick it. I didn't, I don't know. It just didn't sit well with me. Were you guys okay with him saying that? Or like, I was
okay with it, but it was dumb.
Yeah. I didn't really.
A doctor wouldn't say things like that. He is questionable as a doctor.
I do not think that I agree. I do not know. These episodes have not done Dr. Franklin well. Now it does make for a funny line. I didn't even know we were married, right? The idea.
That was funny.
But
the stick.
Yeah, that was funny.
What?
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just me.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot about it, but it's making me not like him.
Yeah,
He's
I
just
agree.
Becoming
the storyline with the person, the whole storyline with the person waking up in the middle, immediately having connections with him. I also think that someone else brought up the fact that during the episode where Dr. Franklin said, well, he's just a lurker, but at the same time earlier, Franklin had a whole medical
clinic,
facility
like a free
for
clinic.
lurkers. Yeah, clinic. So I think they're having trouble figuring out how to write.
Seems to be.
And hopefully.
Yeah, and they're making him into a villain almost. I mean, that is a problematic doctor. Like, seriously, if a doctor talked like that to me, plus, that episode where he comes onto her, it's not like he's known her for a while.
Yeah.
She's new. She just woke up and he's coming on to her.
Yeah.
That I would be so angry if he was a doctor on the ship that I was on.
Wow, I didn't think my one little comment was going to.
No. I'm glad you did.
No. I'm glad. No, I agree. Yeah, I am too. And then next, the remaining storyline, which is actually funny that we're going to the end, but we get Talia's ex-husband, though it wasn't truly out of love. We get a little bit more background on the Psi Corps, that they do arranged marriages, which is interesting. The Centauri do it for political reasons. The Psi Corps does it to the same way you would do when you're raising racehorses, right? You look at bloodlines and you have people, you pay a lot of money for a Kentucky Derby or a champion to breed your horse to help breed a champion. Let's start with you, Lou. Any thoughts on this Talia's storyline?
The big thing I took away from it, and was a bit of a surprise, was at the end when Talia said that she actually fears the Psi Corps. And I thought that was very interesting because up until even in the previous episode, we were led to believe that she was all in on the Psi Corps. Yeah. So that was a bit of a 180, I thought. But the overall storyline itself, again, there was a lot of great character interplay. And one of the things I would notice that I wouldn't have noticed, because you asked us the question last time, Jesse, was how Sheridan was addressing everybody. And then he said he called Garibaldi by his first name in this episode. He said Michael. And I go, ooh, that's showing something that I wouldn't have noticed if Jesse hadn't mentioned that previously. So that was interesting. Overall, I thought it was a really solid storyline. I didn't really like the way, and Karen, please don't send a World of Warcraft clan after me or anything like that.
I won't.
I didn't like the way Keith S. played Stoner, and it's kind of a weird name too. But he was so smarmy, and I didn't think that aspect was needed. Like, I understand he might feel superior to everybody because he's got this ability that a lot of people probably don't know about and so forth. But I just thought he laid that on a little too thick, or like, it's one thing to be arrogant, but he came off as more smarmy. And I found that a real turnoff with that character. I get that we're not supposed to like the character, but I think if he would have just played it a little more subtly, it goes a long way for me. It just really, his performance really turned me off. It was my major negative of this whole episode. But it was interesting, the interplay with Garibaldi and Talia. Like, you can tell that Garibaldi really cares for her, and he's on this guy right off the bat. And it only intensified when he found out the connection that Talia had to him. And he was so exuberant that when he went and told her that he was going to protect her, and that at the moment, at that particular moment, because we didn't know exactly Stoner's capabilities, Talia's reaction was like, I'm going, whoa, that's a little out of character for her. So that was interesting to see how she told him to get lost, basically. And when she came back to apologize to him, he was cool about it. He didn't like trip over himself or anything like that. He says, hey, no problem, that's cool. And the interplay between those two characters is becoming quite interesting, and it's good to see Talia is forming some connections with several of the crew members now, so I'm enjoying that. As for Stoner himself, this whole Psi Corps thing, like I don't know if this guy's coming back, because if Psi Corps knows about his abilities and they've let him run as a free operative, then what's going to happen when he leaves the station and goes back to Psi Corps? They're just going to release him again, aren't they? I didn't really understand that aspect, and why wouldn't other security sections of the Earth government or something intervene? Or again, I don't understand the relationships between Psi Corps and the regular security details and that. So that was a little murky for me. And again, I'm going to say it, and listeners are going to, so there he goes again. He says, but the details are a little too sketchy for me to fully understand how this is going to play out. So that's most of my takeaways from that. It was an interesting storyline, and the only thing I would say is they gave it away right in the first scene when Stoner was talking to that other passenger, and the guy just changed his mind so quickly. It's kind of, okay, this guy's still got psychic abilities of some sort. Why did they do that? I would have left that scene out and made it a much more nebulous as to whether or not the guy had powers or not. But you two might have a different take on that.
Karen?
Yeah, I agree. It's not a World of Warcraft thing. I like his voice. That's essentially it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he did what he could with the direction, and I think he probably overplayed it. I think he did. I don't think we were meant to see how obvious he was. I would like to think that he would have been more subtle in his machinations. There's an SAT word for you. I do think that he still works for Psi Corps. I don't think he was ever released from Psi Corps.
Right.
He said, I don't want to be associated with Talia anymore. I want to do my own thing. And they said, well, you're strong. So yeah, we're okay with that. And they sent him off to do all these black ops. And I think one of his assignments was to bring her back from Babylon 5. We've seen that they are interested in what's going on in Babylon 5.
Mm-hmm.
They see things going on there as maybe a bit subversive. They see, I don't know if they have a mole on Babylon 5, but they see her becoming disenfranchised a little bit. And to me, her mistrust led me to believe that after she found out about the Bureau 13, which we're not calling it that anymore.
Yeah.
That she did more research, that she knows a bit more about what's going on, or at least gets an inkling of the things that are going on. And so she's not willing to throw herself in 100%. While she, and this is just me drawing conclusions, while she appreciates what they've done for her and how they give her life structure, she's starting to think that maybe they're not good. And while what she's doing there on Babylon 5 is quote unquote good, I don't think it's good, but I would like to think she thinks she has good motivations, which I think she does, but she's not into what the Psi Corps does. Mm-hmm. And maybe they got this feeling, so they sent Stoner in. And again, I think that maybe his name was meant to lead you to the fact that he's taking drugs. I mean, he took drugs in order to do whatever, enhance his abilities. It wasn't to get rid of them. I mean, I'm guessing 100% it wasn't that he was being experimented on, because he was a strong telepath, and maybe they decided, hey, let's try and enhance this even more. So I think he overplayed it. I don't think that these people would have clued in so quickly to what his motivations were, because he telegraphed it. That first scene where he comes on board and you can see that he's altering that guy's reactions to him. And Garibaldi sees it right off the bat and guesses this dude is doing something. To me, I'm like, okay, if he was under the radar and he's been successful for all these years, it wouldn't be that easy to pin him. So I agree with you, Lou. I think he overplayed it. I think it's probably a construct of the writing that in order for our benefit, Peter David decided, well, let's make this straightforward. And let's not make it subtle, because to make it subtle, maybe we wouldn't get it. So I understand from that perspective, but it's not realistic to me that they would have pinned him down right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just gonna say, because like Karen, like when you're talking and this whole this relationship between Stoner and Talia, if Psi Corps has found them to be the perfect genetic match for each other to perpetuate or enhance the future Psi Corps agents, they're trying to, maybe it's like this, some sort of like Dune thing where they're trying to genetically create a Superman or something down the road. If that's an important goal for them, why wouldn't they just order her back and do this? Like, why do they have to be so like circuitous about this and have him come there? And now he's exposed, so now everybody knows about him. So
right,
you know, again, details, like I don't understand the details of the Psi Corps and whatnot, but it just seemed like a very clunky way to do that. So yeah,
agreed. Although she does think that he was booted from Psi Corps.
Well, everybody did.
So right. So calling her back.
Well, they didn't have to tell her why. They just said, "We want you to come back." So
that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know why either. That it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, unless Stoner himself was doing some under the radar type thing, like maybe he wanted to have progeny, special progeny, and Psi Corps didn't care. I don't know, but yeah, I agree. That's murky at best.
So I remember, and I will try to do this without spoilers.
Okay. You've already got me curious now.
Right.
Yeah. When TNT picked up the show, they also gave them budgets to do 2 or 3 TV movies. And in the beginning is the first one they did that basically shares all the reveals of the first 2 or 3 seasons in a one movie. It tells you how the Mollari Earth War started. It tells you why it ended. It explains that missing hole in Sinclair's mind. This whole movie gives all that away. And so fans reached out because JMS was very active in fandom. Like, okay, you've spoiled this for everyone who's now going to watch it for the first time. And he said, there's 2 kinds of things you can do. You can watch a series and you don't know what the characters don't know either. Or you can watch it and as an audience, you know what the characters don't know, and you can enjoy it watching that way.
That's a good answer.
So, yeah. And so I think for this is they made the decision as the audience, now you know there's something different about him. And the storyline is to watch them, the characters, figure out what you already know.
Yeah.
Is that a little bit better, Lou?
I understand that device as a narrative device. It's just, and now that you mentioned that in the beginning, it sounds to me like the fandom was giving him feedback that saying, you're not giving us enough details. So he wrote this movie to answer all those questions. So
well, no, at this point, I mean, I believe he wrote this to give new listeners, new viewers hey, here's an entry point. And now then you could do versus, and if you notice, all our listeners have said, no, it is better to watch this going, not knowing anything. And then at the end of when we get to the end of season 4, then watch it and then we can discuss it. So, yeah. So I think it was just him trying to figure out how he wants to do this.
So is there anything in this episode that is going to have play some factors going down the road?
A couple things, but not major. I was just explaining, I was just giving you a perspective of why they may have, because I thought the same thing, like, well, that's just blatant. I mean, this isn't even subtle. This was the Jedi mind trick. These aren't the droids you're looking for. I mean, that was just blatant that. So, yeah.
But
so just the thought why that is.
Yeah, I guess. But even just as soon as they would have said that he was or Talia knew him, then that he was from Psi Corps, I think the viewing audience would already think, well, does he really not have any powers anymore, or does he? Like, I don't think we needed that, but
yeah. Okay.
You're doing I'm just one small sliver of a spectrum of viewers. So from my perspective, I don't think it was a needed scene, and I would have preferred that it hadn't been there.
Yeah, got it. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Just give you a different thought. Yeah. All right. So anything else we need to talk about this?
I'm good.
I think that's it. Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I want to apologize to everyone listening that I had my own agenda with hair and women and stuff like that.
Fine.
No. I love this. Yeah, I love this. All right. So ratings, Karen?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 9 hairbrushes.
Very good.
I love it. Lou?
I'll give it 8 secret blood transfusions.
I'm going to give it 9 as well. I just love this one. 9 out of 10 Emperor decreed divorces.
Nice.
So, yeah, very nice. We have a little bit of feedback, correct, Karen?
We do, from Nathan, who confirms that he is the Nathan on Twitter. So awesome.
Yes.
He says, hope you enjoyed this episode because I love it, even though it follows the quote-unquote annoying wife trope. But I think here it's appropriate considering that it's about arranged marriages and not one created by choice. Shows that Londo's insistence on marriage as a foundation of the Centauri Republic back in Warp Era is partially a hypocritical view due to being a hostage of a system. There's also a question if Jakar slept with Londo's wife. Okay, I don't think there's a question. Just coming from me, I don't think there's any question at all.
I agree.
Quite a scandal and a small revenge on both his and Mariel's part. For me, this episode also highlights the need for a diverse writing team on the shows. Starting with season 3, JMS is the sole writer on all episodes but one, and if you haven't yet got the hang of his approach to comedy yet, you'll probably see it when it repeats itself, which makes this episode a departure for his style, which fans are used to, and I sometimes wish was more diverse. Really like how Peter David makes feelings light, every interaction between characters in an appealing and warm way, even if those feelings are hate or disdain. And the human story continues to be boring to me, just like most of them were all previous season. With regards, me.
All right, great.
So, and again, it's not me, it's Nathan, me.
Yeah, so very nice. Very cool. Any thoughts on our YouTube channel, Lou?
Yeah, we didn't do episode 5 because on our last podcast because that one had just gone up, so we've got a couple more comments there, and that was the episode with Dwight Schultz, The Long Dark. They've all picked up or most of them have picked up on the inconsistency with Franklin with the lurkers, having the clinic in one episode and then naming them in a next one, so that was interesting to see. And the general consensus is this is not a great episode, and for some, Simon says it's probably the weakest of season 2. So what else do we got here? They all say that Dwight Schultz was great, and it's too bad that the characterization was off because this could have been a good episode about the prejudice against mental illness and the homeless or the treatment of veterans and so forth. So that was good. And then Texas, and you said Texas Analshock, right? You say
yes.
You know this person, right?
I do not know this person, but I know the name.
Oh, okay. I thought you knew him because I was expecting, or her. Sorry, I'm just assuming there. But they point out that a lot of people just don't like Franklin, and this episode is a big part of why. And then he says, fortunately, I believe this is the last truly cringy behavior for him. Well, we just talked about in this episode that we thought he did something cringy again. So there you go.
Yeah.
And then they say they disagree with me, and they seem to do that a lot. I don't remember that from previous comments, but he didn't agree with my idea of a flashback. And I would counter with saying that I would easily take a flashback and get rid of the romantic subplot, and I think it would have been a better episode.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
That is that. And then for episode 6, just give me a sec to call it up here. We got quite a few comments, and this is for a spider in the web. MS Scholar, I guess, says the thing about standalone episodes, even if they don't push the story forward, they do provide great character moments, and I think that's quite true, and we saw that again with this episode, so that's good. Copycat says focusing on their death is that person doesn't want to remember that moment. Oh yeah, we're talking about why they would focus on a person's dying. Yeah. They would let go of their humanity and allow the program to take control. I guess that's a plausible explanation, but it's not something that you normally see in mind control things, to take the most traumatic moment from a person's life and make that your controlling point. It's usually some idyllic, happy memory kind of thing where they do that and make them believe that they're reliving that memory.
Or they plant something.
Yeah, or they plant, like a false memory. So that it's possible, but
it's plausible, yeah.
That's Nathan said that I love that you enjoy this episode much more than I do because it allowed me to get more out of it, which is awesome. That's a nice bonus for us, so we like that. And he looked up Garibaldi's rank, and it seems he's not military. Or some different branch of military, because in a wiki he's called Chief Warrant Officer, so people would have to call him Chief. In this case, I would certainly prefer to call him by his name, and turns out his subordinates were calling him by his rank and didn't use an informal title. So it says, and then he says it's funny to find out things like this after so much time. So
yeah,
that's cool. And then we're getting back into the whole senator thing, and it was interesting listening to you guys talk about it because as Karen mentioned, I'm Canadian, you're American.
Yeah.
And we have senators here in Canada too. Their function's a bit different. And I still have, for me, that scene doesn't play out, or to me, it typifies probably real world behavior, like you guys were saying. But for Sheridan, I just don't believe that he would respond to a senator's request, in quotes, like that. What if it was something that countermanded his primary goals or objectives? Like,
sure.
And I understand in real life these things, these kind of transactions happen all the time. So there's that. And Sheridan at least showed that he was a little ticked off that he had to do it. But my problem still is that he did do it. And that's all I want to say about that. So it's interesting. It's just some cultural differences. Even though Americans and Canadians, the rest of the world, were alike, especially American Canadians, we're alike in a lot of things, but the differences that we have tend to stick out on the weirdest points. So I just found that. Then Simon says, and this is a good one here, there should be a drinking game for every time Jesse mentions Bruce Springsteen. And I suggest a new one for Lou every time there aren't enough details given.
And I guess one for me when I mention hair.
Yep, there you go.
I like that. I do make that joke, and I think I've made it here. I know I have in my other podcast. Charles always says that in my Doctor Who podcast. If I mention Bruce, he says, take a drink. And so, yes, it is definitely, unfortunately, it is who I am. It's so many ways.
Unfortunately,
yes,
I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I always mention Star Trek. So
that's true.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Then final thoughts. Karen says, senators and congressmen, and my inner Bob Dylan says, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the hall.
Yep.
I like that.
I love that a lot.
Al Raffanelli says, we haven't heard of the Bureau 13 game when we did the episode. It was just something we came up because it sounded neat. Later, we found out there was a game by that name, at which point I decided it wouldn't be appropriate to use that name again. And had conversations with a game company, and there was no problem. I didn't want to walk on the turf unintentionally or otherwise. So he said any secret group is going to change its name from time to time anyway. It's not like they're in the yellow pages or anything. So so that was good. Sinclair was a commander, not a captain.
That is true. They did say yes.
So that's good to know. And
speaking of, one of the things in the Lurker's Guide there was that when they said that Bruce Boxleiter, when they were filming the scene where Londo gets shot with the pellets, that Bruce Boxleiter pulls up his wrist, hits, and said, Sinclair here, send someone from MedLab. And everyone just cracked up because he said Sinclair instead of Sheridan. So
I forgot to mention that Lou was back in this one.
Yes,
our good friend Lou.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
It has my hairline too.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, Evangeline says that Sheridan didn't do as the senator wanted him to do. He did ask Thalia when Asogi was murdered, but in the end, he told Amanda Carter and Thalia to make the deal against the wishes of the Senator Earth.
Mm-hmm.
He does part of what.
Yeah, he started out doing it, which is a fair point. Whether he reported back to the senator, we don't know because that wasn't shown.
Yeah.
So that's a fair point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. And another comments here about Garibaldi is a chief warrant officer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know even like U.S. or Canadian military, to be honest, but a chief warrant officer is that not a military term? Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, because obviously Garibaldi is considered senior staff.
It's
right? And
it's a government position.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he definitely is in Sheridan's inner circle, and he was in Sinclair's inner circle. Now you could make the argument Jeff and Michael had this history and that's why, but I like the idea that we are slowly getting to see, because once again, this is Star Trek is my first love in science fiction. So I will always have a special place in my heart. But the difference is we are showing that this new guy coming in, this is only March, according to things I've read. So he's only been leading the station for about 3 months. So it makes perfect sense that they would still be getting to know each other, right? He's still on his probation period, right? Like usually when someone gets hired, their first 90 days are probationary period. So that makes sense that they would still be trying to figure each other out.
Okay.
Yeah, the chief warrant officer it's a part of the Army, but they're appointed to that position.
Yeah, non-commissioned.
Right. So
in the Canadian Army says
it's one of those walking the line things.
It's equivalent for Navy personnel. The equivalent rank for Navy personnel is Chief Petty Officer First Class. So interesting.
It'd be interesting if I may tweet at JMS, not that he answers everyone's questions, but just, hey, this came up in our podcast. Any thoughts on anything you want? Send me a link of where I could find this.
Yeah. So, where did you research it? That would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else? By the way, I love the community we are getting here.
Mm-hmm.
People giving us a lot of great feedback. I appreciate the emails.
Yep.
And all the different feedback. It appears we've got a nice little community going, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah, and it's a nice symbiotic relationship too, because we're finding out things from the veterans here, and as some of these responses have shown, we're pointing out things that some of the veterans never thought of before. So that's cool.
Yeah,
it works good
for
on both sides.
That makes me very happy. Yeah. So Lou, if someone wants to join this community, tell us how they can reach us.
You can reach us on Lou's Reviews at YouTube, where you'll find these episodes and you'll be able to comment on them if you like. And you can also find me on Twitter at Lou W. Sitzma or S King Podcast.
All right. Karen?
You can find me at Aleveria, Aleveria, a lot of places. And my blog is aliesstuff.com.
Good. And I am at Jesse Jackson, DFW on Twitter. Nathan, hope you follow me. If you want to get blind, fall on the floor drunk, listen to Set Lusting Bruce, where I spend an hour talking about Bruce Springsteen.
Alcohol poisoning.
So you will be you will feel good after the end of that podcast. And we just had a brand new episode of How Many, which is where a bunch of buddies of mine get together and discuss pop culture. The latest episode is we went through different sports mascots and are they good? Are they bad? And I continue to talk Doctor Who on Next Stop Everywhere with our buddy Charles Skaggs. And finally, the Perfectly Good podcast where Sylvan Groth and I are discussing every John Hyatt song from alphabetical order. So a lot. But thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it a lot. We've worked out our schedule that we won't skip a week with the holidays. So we should be back in about a week with a new episode. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, listeners. we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And scene.